Many of you know Steve Villa. He's with the American Waterworks Association and has been for a number of years. He's the Regulatory Affairs Manager. I worked with Steve on a number of things, a number of regulations, and I'm very pleased to have him with us today so that we can hear his perspective on Dr. John Snow and how Dr. John Snow approached to solving the problem he was dealing with relates to science-based decision-making process. Please, Steve, why don't you go right ahead?
Yeah, Steve, you have moderator privileges, so you can enable your own microphone and video if you choose to, and you can advance your own slides. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, you might want to turn it up just a little bit.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike and Dendra, for the opportunity to talk about John Snow and his contribution to drinking water treatment. I would like to come at it from the angle of his contribution to science-based decision-making, and in particular science-based decision-making in the regulatory process here in the United States. The basic thesis here is that John Snow's work really did set the stage for applying scientific information and building a weighted evidence approach to not only recognizing a link between an adverse health outcome out in the community, but drawing that linkage into drinking water and sanitation. So, as today, we're all focused on addressing a pressing public health problem, and we really want to focus our time and effort on those things that have a real impact. In John Snow's case, he was literally looking at a disease that was rampant in the country. That was literally killing hundreds of people, not within years, but within days. And that he was injecting his work in for the purposes of really having a real public health benefit for the community. So how did he go about that? Well, he went out and he actually collected data. He looked at where were the deaths, how many there were, where were folks getting their drinking water. And he didn't just look at his theory, he also evaluated competing theories. And he looked at instances where there was data that didn't quite fit the model, and he found explanations for it. For example, he went out to a factory that was within the zone of influence of the Florida State Contaminant, and he found out that folks in that factory were not getting sick at the same rate as people close by that you would have expected them to be getting sick at the same rate. And so he found out why they were using a different form. And so he had an open mind. He went out and he looked and he tried to investigate a number of different considerations, and he came back to developing a weight of evidence that helped him move forward toward a solution. And here in the United States, on the Safe Drinking Water Act, we use a similar process. We have it actually built into the regulatory process itself, but it's also a thought process that's embedded in our culture. We do have the advantage of being able to look at a laundry list of contaminants where we have some understanding of the contaminant itself. John Snow was looking at death in the community, and he didn't really have that piece of the puzzle, and we do, and we were able to take advantage of that, but still we follow the same basic outline. We identified a public health concern. We try and identify occurrence of that contaminant, and then we move on from there to making a decision about whether or not there's enough data to act on, or whether we need more data. And then eventually we get into the situation that we've got a problem. We recognize how large scope is, and we've got an opportunity to intervene, and we do that either through best practices or underneath SWA in a rulemaking process. So just digging into that a little bit further, here in the United States, we start out with a universe of literally tens of thousands of contaminants, potential contaminants, and when we move through a screening process where we use the likelihood that there's a potential health risk and the likelihood that there's an occurrence of drinking water, and we screen out contaminants that are less likely to be a concern, and continue down selecting using criteria much as Snow would have done, albeit with more data, to get to contaminants that are really where we need to focus for additional risk reduction. And for us, it's the contaminant cannabis, and right now the current contaminant-free list includes more than 110 contaminants, 116, and those are where we focus our efforts. This slide here is mislabeled, that is the third contaminant candidate list is lengthy, but it is the area where we focus and we look for those opportunities for additional risk reduction. And part of what we do is we move on from this list to gathering occurrence data, just as Snow did. For those of you that are at utilities, you realize that right now, in the next couple of years, you're going to be monitoring for about 30 contaminants, about 7 volatile organics, synthetic organic contaminants, 1,4-dioxane, chrome-6, and 5 other metals, fluoride, perfluorinated compounds like PFOS and PFOA, and some hormones, including synthetic estrogens. So like Snow, we've got some contaminants that we've got a strong link to public health, and we've got some that we're still building the knowledge base to know whether or not it's necessary to act on them, but we're going out and we're getting the occurrence data. Once we have that occurrence data, we're able to enter into a process we call it Reg Det, or regulatory determinations, and we sort through the available information on whether or not there's a public health concern, whether there's a toxicity, and whether or not there's actual occurrence in drinking water, the real probability of occurrence in drinking water at a significant level. And we ask ourselves the question of, is there a real opportunity to intervene and reduce the risk to the public? Is there treatment? Will treatment be effective? Is drinking water really the route of exposure that matters? Would it be better to manage the risk in some other way? And so that takes place in the regulatory determinations process. We expect that there'll be a new list of things that are passing over into the going to be regulated category here in the summer. Some of the ones that seem right on the cusp of that decision are nitrosamines. Disinfection byproducts, at least that's the primary concern in drinking water, and also chloride, and we'll be seeing that process move forward into the rulemaking process, or the actual risk management process over the next several years. That really does bring me to the last substantive slide I have here for you. In that science does take time, and if you looked at Snow's experience, it's very much parallel to what we have today. He had a hypothesis that he took time and effort to demonstrate, that he actually identified after substantiating his hypothesis, the fact that there was a plausible solution, that the solution was implemented, and just centering on the broad street pump. That experience took a number of years, or a number of months. But his experience there as a Broad Street pump was bookended by several decades of work by others and himself that built up the hypothesis at the front end, and then followed through and not only made it to the substantiation of the initial theory, but onto deciding what the actual contaminant was that was causing disease. And as Mike McGuire showed a few minutes ago, it took decades farther to really understand how treatment could be effective to best control for the pathogens that were concerned. And today, our process does take time, and that's part of the frustration we often have, is making the transition from recognizing a problem to getting enough information to act on it, and then following through and understanding of it, having the best control with the least amount of adverse consequences. So here is a modern example. Take disinfection byproducts, judging from the list of listeners that we have today, participants. It's a familiar story, so I won't spend a great deal of time on it. He started in the 1970s with an interesting recognition that trihalomethanes were present in drinking water, and trihalomethanes being a potential carcinogen. We then entered basically 2 decades of intense research trying to flesh out what disinfection products are present and how to manage them. And that ultimately gave us the stage 1 and subsequently the stage 2 disinfection byproduct rules. The first rule, stage 1 rule, looked nothing like the THM rule originally. It had different MCLs, it had more MCLs, it incorporated alternative disinfectants. So it really did build off the research that was occurred in the intervening decades. And then the stage 2 moved out into a location and annual average. So again, taking the knowledge base and recognizing that we could do a better job of control and tweaking the regulatory structure. The story's not finished. With Reg 3, I've already mentioned we'll be moving on into nitrosamines. There's an interesting chlorine. So we're already looking at the effects of some of the disinfectants that we've shifted to as we've gone to deal with the problem that was recognized earlier. And then we're not going to let the story end at that point. We've got a process of reevaluating information as it accrues over time, rules implement. And so we'll be revisiting the current structure with the 6-year review process later on in this decade, and that'll look at the body of science around cancer risk, reproductive developmental risk associated with EVPs, and evaluating whether more regulation is appropriate. So with that, I'd like to conclude and just to emphasize the point that Mike's already made. The Giant Snail really was truly a professional that has had a continuing influence on the shape of the drinking water profession and the way we go about risk management here, even the current day. Mike, I'll just turn it back to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve. I really appreciate your presentation. I'd like to ask if there are any questions of Steve.
Actually, Mike, I'm not sure if this is a question or a comment, but in looking at Steve's slide about how long it can take to get from A to B, I wonder if he, and I know you did, saw the announcement from the British government about their assessment that antibiotic resistance in bacteria and the lack of development of antibiotics for the future is viewed by them as one of the real concerns that could knock public health and environmental health treatment back almost to John Snow's time.
Steve, what do you think?
I'm aware of it. I think that the wastewater implications are going to be the ones that come around first. I think we're a fair distance away from understanding how that's going to play through in the drinking water cycle.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. I hope that this does not descend upon us as a critical emergency. I hope we have time to sort this out and to understand what is going on and how we can avoid a catastrophe. But if we lost the ability of antibiotics to kill bugs, we would be in a whole lot of trouble, of course. The principles of multiple barriers between contaminated water and drinking water, however, would be the same. So far as I know, bacteria and pathogens have not developed a resistance to chlorine or chlorine dioxide and ozone, and UV for that matter. So we would still have a job, certainly, to protect drinking water, even if that antibiotic resistance occurred. It would still be, obviously, a horrible situation. Any other questions for Steve at this point?
Yeah, actually, an observation, Steve, Mike. In the interval that's coming up, I'm going to post some links to the GIS maps and the actual modern interpretation of this outbreak. How do you think Snow would have handled having that amount of data and being able to use that data in his own work?
Well, yes, it would certainly have been helpful, but he was a very smart guy and was able to infer a lot of causation by very little data, which is kind of interesting. So, not hearing any questions for Steve, I'm going to move on to our break. So it is now the California time, about 10 minutes past 10. We will reassemble in 5 minutes at about 10:15 and move on with the presentations. So back to the pump in 5 minutes, please.